We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph and Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 47a. This daf is sponsored by Shalom bin Noim in memory of Moshe Leo ben David. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor an Amud or a Daf, see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. The Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught in a Braisa, Kivsei Atzeres, with regards to the lambs of Atzeres. Again, those are brought together with the Shtei Halechem of Atzeres of Shavuos. So, Ein Mekachin es Halechem Ela B'Shchita. They only sanctify the bread through the Shchita, through the slaughtering. When the Kivsei Atzeres are slaughtered, that's when the Lechem is Kadosh. Keitzad, how so? Shachtan Lishmon Vizorak Daman Lishmon. If they are slaughtered for their sake and the blood is thrown for their sake, so then Kiddush Halechem, then the bread is sanctified. Shachtan Shalo Lishmon Vizorak Daman Shalo Lishmon. If they're slaughtered not for their sake and the blood is thrown not for their sake, so Lo Kiddush Halechem, then the bread is not Kadosh. Shachtan Lishmon Vizorak Daman Shalo Lishmon. If they're slaughtered for their sake, but the Zrika of the Dam, the application, the throwing of the blood is Shalo Lishmon, not for their sake, so then we have a Machlokas Tanoim. Halechem Kadosh ve'eno Kadosh Divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says the bread is holy, but it's not holy. It's sanctified, but it's not sanctified according to Rebbe. The Gemara will discuss exactly what that means. Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Shimon Omer, Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Shimon says, Liolam eno Kadosh, it is not Kadosh, ad sheyishchot lishmon ve'yizrok daman lishmon, until you have the Shchita lishmon and the Zrikas Hadam lishmon, both the slaughtering and the throwing of the blood have to be done for their sake, and only in that situation is it going to be Kadosh. And Rashi explains, Kiddush as halechem, it sanctifies the bread, which means mutter ba'achila. That means that the bread is now mutter ba'achila, it's able to be eaten. And lo Kiddush halechem, if the bread is not sanctified, what that means is, v'lo tafis pidyono, b'kedushas shtei halechem. Now, if one would try to redeem that bread, the pidyon, the money, is not going to get the kedusha shtei halechem, ela b'kedushas shar kedushas halishka. Rather, it's just going to get the regular kedushas halishka. What Rashi means over here is that the bread, the moment the bread is made in the kli, so at that point it has what's called kedushas damim. If it would be redeemed at that point in time, so then the money would not need to be used specifically for shtei halechem. It would essentially just have kedushas damim of the Beis Hamikdash, and you'd have to use the money for something to do with the Beis Hamikdash. But once it's kiddush halechem, that means that it has a kedushas haguf. Now it's permitted to be eaten again. Once it's permitted through the kivsei atzeres, it becomes permitted to be eaten. And so at that point, when it has that kedushas haguf, now if it were to be redeemed, so then the kedusha of the kedusha shtei halechem would now go on the money, and that's the difference between, again, kiddush halechem and lo kiddush halechem. Again, what the Bryce is talking about specifically here is a kedushas haguf. And Rashi continues, V'toras kohanim yolef lam yikarbono al zevach toda magid shem nizbach shelo l'shem toda lo kidesh lachmo. In Toras kohanim, they learn it out from the pasuk karbono al zevach toda. It teaches that if it's slaughtered shelo l'shem toda, not for the sake of a toda, so then the lechem is not going to be kadosh. V'kivsei atzeres, and when it comes to the lambs of atzeres, again that's by toda. When it comes to kivsei atzeres, the mekachi lechem, the fact that they sanctify the bread mitoda v'ayil nazir gamrin, and that's learned from toda and ayil nazir, the ram of the nazir. And Kadosh ve'eno Kadosh, again, according to Rebbe, it's Kadosh ve'eno Kadosh in a situation where the Zrikas Hadam is Shelo Lishma, Mefarish L'Kamon, that's going to be explained later on. And the Gemara continues, my time of the Rebbe, what's the reason of Rebbe? Again, Rebbe says essentially that it is the Shchita that is Kiddush Halechem, and the reason is the Chsiv, because it's written in the Pasuk, V'so ayil yasa zevach shlomim la'Hashem al sal hamatzos. It says the ayil is zevach shlomim la'Hashem al sal hamatzos, on the basket of the matzos. L'meimra, what that means to say is the Shchita mekacha, that it is the Shchita that is mekadesh, the Shchita, the zevach shlomim, the Shchita is what sanctifies. Rashi explains, V'so ayil, the Pasuk says, so ayil, this is El Nazir, this is a pasuk specifically by the ram of the Nazir. Yasa zevach shlamim la'Hashem al sal hamatzos alma zevichas ayil. You see that from the pasuk that the zevichas ayil, the slaughtering of the ram, mekadsha l'sal, that is what sanctifies the basket, talking about the sal hamatzos, the basket of the matzos. Uminei gamrin on the kivsei atzeres. It's from there that we learn to the kivsei atzeres. So that's the source of Rebbe. Again, the source of Rebbe, that it is the shchita that is mekadesh. For Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Shimon, now Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Shimon, again, Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Shimon says that what causes the Kedusha is both the Shchita and the Zrikas Hadam. So Yasa, it says in the Pasuk Yasa, again it says Yasa Zevach Shlamim, Ad Sheyasa Kol Asi Yosef. That refers to all of the procedures, all the way all of the procedures that have to do with the dam, the avodas hadam, and so therefore that is through the zrikas hadam, and the zrikas hadam is also part of sanctifying the bread. And the Gemara continues, V'Rebbi Nami, now Rebbe also haksiv yasa, doesn't it say yasa? And to that, iksiv zevach yasa. Now if it was written in the pasuk zevach yasa, switch the order of the words, kiddukamer, then it's like you're saying, then Rebbe would agree with Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Shimon. But hashtag iksiv yasa zevach, but now that it's written in the pasuk yasa zevach, b'meh yasa bezvicha, what's causing this to happen, the sanctification? It's happening through the zvicha, it's happening through the slaughtering. And the Gemara continues, Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Shimon. Now, Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Shimon, haksiv zevach, isn't it written zevach? Zevach does mean slaughter, so why is it not entirely dependent upon the slaughtering? And the Gemara says to that according to Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Shimon, ahumi boy leilechid Rebbe Yochanan, that word zevach in the pasuk is needed for the teaching of Rebbe Yochanan. The Yamar Rebbe Yochanan, because Rebbe Yochanan said, hakol modim, all admit shetzarech sheyeh lechem b'shas shchita. Everybody agrees that there has to be the bread has to be present at the time of the slaughtering. Rashi explains, hakol modim, everybody admits, everybody agrees, afilu Rabbi Eliezer, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, Rashi is referring to Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Shimon, even according to Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Shimon, Da'amar Zrika Iker, who says that the Zrika, the throwing of the blood, is primary, but still he admits that tzarech sheyehei lechem b'shas shchita, that the lechem has to be present at the time of the shchita, v'lo have b'shas shchita lo mekad shalei Zrika. If it's not around at the time of the shchita, then the Zrika, the throwing of the blood, will not be mekadesh it. And the Gemara continues and asks, "My kadosh ve'eno kadosh." What does it mean in the Brisa when Rebbe says it's kadosh ve'eno kadosh? That's talking about a situation where the shechita is done properly, is done lishma, but the zrika is not. So then Rebbe said that the lechem, the bread, is kadosh ve'eno kadosh. What exactly does that mean? And that we have a machlokas amoraim as follows: Abaya Omar, Abaya says kadosh ve'eno gomer. It is holy, but it's not complete. It's not a full kedusha. Rava Omar, Rava says kadosh ve'eno nitter. It's kadosh, but it's not permitted to be eaten. That's the machlokas amoraim, again interpreting what Rebbe means. And the Gemara continues and asks, "My beinayu, what's the difference between these two opinions? What's the difference between Abaya, who says kadosh ve'eno gomer, and Rava, who says kadosh ve'eno nitter?" And the Gemara says to that, "Ika beinayu, the difference between them is lemitfas pidyono, in terms of mitfas pidyono, which means the money used to redeem it, is it going to take that kedusha? Li Abaya lotafas pidyono, according to Abaya, it does not take that redemption kedusha." And we'll see Rashi in a moment. Alternative girsas over here, and l'Rava tafas pidyono. According to Rava, the pidyon will be taken, that redemption kedusha will be upon the money. And Rashi explains, "My beinayu, what's the difference between them, between Abaya and Rava?" Kilomar, what it means to say is as follows: Kevan to Amar Abaya eino gomer. Since Abaya says eino gomer, that it doesn't have the full kedusha, the lechem does not have the full kedusha. So kol shekain deino nitter. It is certainly true that Abaya agrees with Rava that the bread is not permitted to be eaten. Why? To hamimos trumas halishka ba, because this bread, what was it purchased with? It was purchased with the money from the trumas halishka, and as we said above, in order to be eaten, it has to have that kedusha. When it has the kedushas damim, and it doesn't yet have the kedushas haguf, there's no way that it can be eaten at that point in time. Uzrikas dam lo havoy lishman. Again, in this case, the zrikas adam, the case we're dealing with, it was not done properly, it was not done lishma, the tishtarya bachila, and that's what would have made it permitted to be eaten. So ve'eno gomer diyamar Abai l'may hilchasa. So what exactly does Abai mean when he says eino gomer? Because again, Abaya certainly agrees with Rava that the bread cannot be eaten. So what is the difference between Abaya and Rava? And we will skip down now to Rashi's second explanation, preferred explanation in terms of explaining the difference between Abaya and Rava. Lafikach nira l'Rabbeinu, it appears as follows: Dehachi garsinan, the proper text of the Gemara should be as follows: V'lashon haganhu, and this is the proper girsa. This is not like the girsa that we have in our Gemara, reverses Abaya and Rava. Li Abaya tafis pidyono, according to Abaya, who says that it's kadosh ve'eno gomor, so then the pidyon, that kedusha, will go on to the money. Ul Rava lo tafis pidyono, according to Rava, it will not take that kedusha in the redemption. And Rashi explains, Abaya damar eino gomer, according to Abaya, who says that the bread has kedusha, but it's not a full kedusha. So adayin lo chala olav kedushas haguf gemura. What that means is it doesn't have the full kedushas haguf. V'akati shayich be pidyon, and so it's still relevant. It's still possible to have pidyon, to have redemption. Unehi diktishte shchita b'mixas to lo nafik lechulin. Now, granted that the shchita gave it some level of kedusha, that it's not going to become chulin. Umiu akati mechusar gemar kedusha, but still it's finishing the complete. It is lacking rather the complete kedusha. V'shayich be kedushas damim, and therefore there still is a kedushas damim litfos pediono bekedusha, and that kedusha can go on to the money when it's redeemed. But the Rava Diyamar Kadosh Gomor Kedushas Haguf, but Rava who says that it has the full Kedushas Haguf, and it's just that it can't be eaten, so Lo Shayach Be Pidyon, so at this point in time it's not possible to do redemption anymore. V'im Hitfis Mos Be Pidyono Eino Nitfasen, and if he would take money to try to redeem it, the Kedusha would not go on to the money. Dekevan De Eino Yotze Mikdusha Klal, Ezo Kedusha Tachol Be Pidyono, since it's not able to go out from its Kedusha at all, so what Kedusha is going to go on to the redemption? And the idea over here is that if it has Kedushas Haguf, like Rava says it has full Kedushas Haguf, it's just not Nitter Ba'achila, it's not permitted to be eaten. So once it has Kedushas Haguf, so really Pidyon, redemption is not possible. That's why according to Rava, lo tafas Pidyono, and according to Abaya, if it has the Kedushas Haguf at some level, but it doesn't have full Kedushas Haguf, so then we really say that it has Kedushas Damim still, and if it still really has Kedushas Damim, it is possible to redeem, and that's why according to Abaya, we're going to say tafas Pidyono. And the Gemara continues, B'shalom l'Rava, now makes sense according to Rava, Hainu di'ika bein Rebbe l'Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon. We understand the practical difference between Rebbe and Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, because according to Rava, within Rebbe lo tafas pidyono, it has kedushas haguf and redemption is not possible. But according to Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, since the zrika was not done l'shmon, so therefore it doesn't have that kedushas haguf and redemption is possible. Elali Abaya, but according to Abaya, if Abaya says that tafas pidyono, that redemption is possible, that it has the partial kedusha, but not the full kedusha saguf, and therefore redemption is possible. So then, ma'ika bein Rebbe l'Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon. What's the difference between Rebbe and Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon? Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon also agrees that redemption is possible. They both agree that the bread cannot be eaten, and the Gemara answers to that. Ika beinayu, the difference between Rebbe and Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon within Abaya is lifsule biyotze, is whether or not it becomes disqualified. Let's say it leaves the proper area. Rashi explains, B'shalama l'Rava makes sense according to Rava, Da'amar l'Rebbe lav b'nei pidyon ninu, who says according to Rebbe that it cannot be redeemed because it has that kedushas haguf, the akdeshinu shchitasa, the shchit that makes it kadosh. So hainu dika ben Rebbe l'Rebbe Elazar, then we understand the difference between Rebbe and Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon. To Rebbe Elazar, according to Rebbe Elazar, eino kadosh klal kedushas haguf, ela kedushas damim. According to Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, it has no kedushas haguf, it just has kedushas damim, shenikach mitrumas halishka, because it was purchased with money from the Trumas Halishka, which is where they kept the money that was used for these purchases. V'nafik l'chulin, and therefore one's able to redeem it l'chulin. V'tafas pidyono kechol kedushas damim, and then the redemption that kedusha is going to go on to the money like any other kedushas damim. Elali Abaya, but according to Abaya, Da'amar l'Rebbe nami tafas pidyono, says according to Rebbe, redemption also is possible. V'chol shekein l'Rebbe Elazar, and that's certainly true according to Rebbe Elazar. So ma'ika bein Rebbe l'Rebbe Elazar, what's the difference between Rebbe and Rebbe Elazar? And Rashi continues, Ika beinayu lefsule beyotze. The difference between them is whether there's a disqualification of yotze. And Rashi explains, Lo Rebbe mifsal beyotze. According to Rebbe, who says kadosh ve'eno gomer, that it has some kedushas haguf. So then, if it would leave the proper area, it would become disqualified. Im yotze lo yehi kosher. Once it leaves the proper area, it would not be okay. Lishchot olav kvasim acherim, to get other lambs and do the shchita again. At this point, it's become disqualified. But Rashi continues, Lo Rebbe Elazar, according to Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, lo mifsal biyotze, it's not going to be disqualified through yotze. Shalo yard lo kedushas haguf, because it has no kedushas haguf. Ela kedushas damim, it just has kedushas damim. Ve'ein yotze posel ba. If all it has is that monetary kedusha, that kedushas damim, so yotze, the fact that it leaves the proper area, is not going to be a disqualification. Uksherin lishchot ala kavasim acherim, would be okay to slaughter over it other lambs. V'zeh shepirashti tchila shibash gomerhu. Rashi says the first explanation I gave, which we did not read, that's a total mistake. The Farishna Le'el, like was explained earlier. And the Gemara continues, Boy minei Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak min Rav Chia bar Abba. Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak asked Rav Chia bar Abba the following question: Kivsei Atzeres sheshachatan l'shmon v'zorak daman shelo l'shmon. By the lambs of Atzeres, again, let's say they're slaughtered l'shmon, they're slaughtered for their sake, but then there's rikas adam, the throwing of the blood is shelo l'shmon, it's not for their sake. So the question is, Oso halechem, that bread, ma'u ba'achila, what's the halacha in terms of eating that bread? And the Gemara continues and asks regarding this question, Aliba Deman, who is he asking this question according to, meaning according to Rebbe or according to Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon? Aliba de Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, if we're following Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, so that shouldn't be a question at all. Ha'amar Zrika hi de Mekatsha. Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon says it's the Zrika, the throwing of the blood, that sanctifies the bread, which permits it to be eaten. So of course in this situation, if that was done Shalo Lishman, if the Zrika was done Shalo Lishman, it's not going to be permitted to eat. And Aliba de Rebbe, but even if you're going to ask according to Rebbe, again, Rebbe says that it's Kadosh ve'eno Gamor, but we already just said above, Bein li Abaya, Bein li Rava, whether we're following Abaya's interpretation of Rebbe or whether we're following Rava's interpretation of Rebbe, Kadosh ve'eno Nitter, we said that it's Kadosh, but it's not going to be permitted to eat, according to all explanations of Rebbe. So therefore, the answer to the question seems obvious. The answer is, Ma'u b'achila, what's the halach in terms of eating? It is certainly not permitted to eat. And so the Gemara continues and says, Ella aliba dehaitana. Actually, this question that was asked, again, boy minei Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak from Rav Chia bar Abba, this question that Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak asked from Rav Chia bar Abba was going according to a different Tana altogether, the following. Tatani avud Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, because the father of Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba taught the following, Shtei halechem sheyatzu bein shchita lizrika. Let's say the Shtei halechem left the proper area between the shchita and the zrika, between the slaughtering and the throwing of the blood. V'zorak damon shel kvasim chutz lizmanon, and the blood of the kvasim of the lambs was thrown outside of the proper time. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Ein belechem mishum pigel. So you had this intention outside of the proper time. According to Rabbi Eliezer, there is no pigel with regards to the bread. And Rabbi Kiva Omer, Yesh belechem mishum pigel. And Rabbi Kiva says, there is a status of pigel with regards to the bread. And the Gemara now continues and explains the machlokas tanoim in this brayso. So Amar Rav Sheshes says, Hani tanoi, both tanoim in this brayso, meaning both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Kiva, ki Rebbe Svirlahu, fundamentally they hold like Rebbe, the Yomar Shchita Mekadsha, who says that the Shchita, it's the slaughtering of the Kivsei Atzeres, that is Mekadesh, the Lechem, that sanctifies the Lechem. And again, in this case, the Shtei HaLechem, they left the proper area, Bein Shchita Lizrika. So at the time of the Shchita, there would have been that Kedusha that would have sanctified the bread. It then left between the Shchita and the Zrika was done with the intention of Chutz Lizmanan outside of the proper time. So again, both agree that the Shchita was Mekadesh the bread. Miu, nevertheless, Rabbi Eliezer L'Taim, Rabbi Eliezer over here who says there's no pigel with regards to the bread, follows his opinion. The Omar who says Ein Zrika Moelis Liyotze, that Zrika is not effective for Yotze. If it left the proper area, the Zrika will have no effect. For Rabbi Akiva L'Taim, Rabbi Akiva follows his opinion. The Omar Zrika Moelis Liyotze, who says that Zrika is in fact Moelis, it is in fact effective with regards to Yotze. And Rashi explains, Chutz Lizmano, again in the Braisa, the Zrikas Hadam was done with the intention, Chutz Lizmano, Kilomar Amanas Lechol Min Hakvasim Chutz Lizmano. It means to say with the intention of eating from the lambs outside the proper time. And then we explain the Machlokas Tanoim, Hani Tanoi, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Kiva. These Tanoim in the Braisa, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Kiva, they both agree, Shchita Mekadsha, that the Shchita sanctifies the bread, V'yahani Behu Psol Yotze, and therefore, if the bread is sanctified, the point is that if it then leaves the proper area, there will be that Psol of Yotze, that disqualification of leaving the proper area. And the machlokas is, one opinion is Ein Zrika Moelis Liyotze, that the Zrika is not effective for Yotze, Hilkach Lo Kavate Lelechem Bepigel, therefore the Lechem is not established as being Pigel to HaKvar Poselu, because the point is it already is disqualified. V'yamar Beparakama Ein Pigel B'Malkom Psul, we said in the first parak, there's no Pigel once there's disqualification. And the other opinion is Zrika Moelis Liyotze, Zrika is effective for Yotze, to Psul Machmas Davar Acharu, because that is a disqualification, but it's from something else. It's from some other issue. As is explained at the end of the first parak. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis.